Where is the train? Stand in front of approaching a city and start listing what is missing. There is no locomotive, no carriages, no passengers, no conductor, no station, no platform, not one human being anywhere on the canvas. There is no skyline either, no bridge, no landmark, nothing that would let a tourist identify the metropolis in question. The title promises an approach, and the picture withholds every vehicle that could perform one. What you get instead is a trench. 2 sets of rails running along the bottom of a masonry cut, a long retaining wall of dressed stone crossing the canvas almost edge to edge, a stretch of pale sidewalk and parapet along its top. And behind that, a row of apartment buildings turning their unornamented backs to us, windows dark and evenly spaced, cropped hard by the upper edge of the frame. And then, right of center, the thing the whole composition has been quietly organizing itself around, a rectangular black tunnel mouth, absolutely opaque, into which both tracks disappear. Edward Hopper painted it in 1946, oil on canvas, roughly 69 by 91 centimeters. Duncan Phillips bought it the following year, and it has belonged to the Phillips collection in Washington ever since. The motif is not invented. It comes from the open railroad cut on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in the upper 90s, where the New York Central tracks slide underground and continue in darkness down to Grand Central. Anyone who has taken that train has seen it for about 4 seconds and never thought about it again. Hopper thought about it for months. He filled sheets with preparatory drawings, adjusting the height of the wall, the pitch of the diagonals, the exact placement of that black rectangle, because he did not paint what he saw so much as construct what he had felt. He said, more or less, that what interested him was the emotional weather of approaching a large city by train. The curiosity, the anticipation, the fear. Those 3 words are usually quoted as though they were 3 separate feelings. They are not. Anyone who has arrived alone in a big city knows that curiosity and fear are the same nervous event wearing different clothes, and that the body cannot reliably tell you which one it is currently having. Hopper's achievement here is to have found a piece of architecture that produces that ambiguity by itself, without an actor, without a plot, without a single facial expression to help you. The mechanism is positional. Look at where the picture puts you. The vantage point is low, slightly elevated above the rails but well below street level, and it is centered on the track bed, moving forward. You are not standing beside the cut watching a train go by. You are on the tracks. The reason no train is depicted is that you are the train. Hopper has taken the one figure the painting needs and installed it outside the frame, in your body, which is why the canvas feels less like a view and more like a windshield. And now consider what the architecture does to that occupied position. The buildings do not face you. In any postcard of New York, the city presents its facade, the composed, ornamented, photogenic front designed to be looked at. Here, you get the rear elevations, flat brick flanks, service windows, no doors, no entrances, no invitation. A facade addresses a viewer. A blank wall does not acknowledge that a viewer exists. The city in this painting is not hostile, which would at least be a relationship. It is indifferent, which is worse. And Hopper renders indifference architecturally, rather than psychologically. Georg Simmel had described the mechanism 4 decades earlier in his essay on the metropolis and mental life. The city dweller develops a protective reserve, a blasé shell, because a nervous system exposed to that many stimuli and that many strangers would otherwise burn out. What Simmel diagnosed in behavior, Hopper paints in masonry. Those windows are blind for the same reason people on a crowded street do not make eye contact. The reserve has been built into the brickwork. Then there is the light, which is the hardest thing in Hopper and the easiest to overlook. It is not dramatic. There is no sunset, no noir slash of shadow, no theatrical spot. It reads as a flat, clean, early light falling from the left, laying a broad, pale shadow across the lower part of the retaining wall and picking out the top edge of the parapet. It is the least eventful light available, and Hopper uses it the way a good cinematographer uses available light in a hospital corridor, to remove the possibility of the scene being interpreted as special. Nothing is happening today. Nothing was happening yesterday. The wall has been receiving this exact light for 30 years. Which brings us to the black rectangle. It is worth being precise about what the tunnel mouth is doing structurally, because the whole painting is a machine for delivering it. Every diagonal in the composition, the rails, the sidewalk, the top of the wall, the receding line of buildings, converges toward that opening. It is the only truly saturated dark in the canvas, and it has no internal detail whatsoever. It is not a dark space. It is an absence of information, painted flat, like a hole punched in the picture, and it marks a threshold with a very specific property. It is the point at which the city stops being an image and becomes an enclosure. Right now, in the position Hopper has assigned you, the city is still an object of vision. You can appraise it, judge it, decide how you feel about it, and, in principle, still turn back. 20 seconds later, you will be inside it, in the dark, underground, and vision will no longer be the operative sense. Arrival in this painting is not the moment you get somewhere. It is the moment you lose the ability to see where you are going. That is a peculiar thing to have painted in 1946, and the date matters. Millions of demobilized soldiers were coming home that year, most of them by rail, most of them into exactly this kind of cut. The post-war American promise was in full production. Meanwhile, in the Manhattan galleries a few miles from Hopper's studio, a generation of younger painters was busy declaring the figurative image obsolete. And Hopper, 64 years old, unfashionable, obstinate, answered by painting a stone wall with such conviction that no amount of abstraction ever managed to make it look naive. He was not a nostalgist. He simply refused the assumption that emotional content requires either a face or a gesture, because there is genuinely no anecdote here. Nobody has been left. Nobody has been murdered. Nobody is waiting by a window. The picture contains no event, and it is, nonetheless, one of the most anxious objects in American art, which tells you something important about where anxiety actually lives, not in incidents, in geometry, in thresholds, in the interval between deciding to go somewhere and being unable to leave it. The great trick in the end is that Hopper painted the second before, not the arrival, not the disappointment, not the reunion or its failure. the second before held open indefinitely, so that you stand in a museum in Washington permanently, 3 seconds away from a tunnel you will never enter. So, the question the canvas keeps asking quietly, from a wall in the Phillips collection, when you finally arrive somewhere you have been approaching for a long time, is the thing you feel curiosity, or is it fear? And have you ever, once, been able to tell them apart? Where art does not console, it autopsies.